This morning we're going to learn how to evaluate if a write operation went through for replication from one server to the other. And in this example we're going to use a hypothetical example of just two. Now the server that I'm currently on does not have replication enabled, and there's not another server tied to it. So when we have an environment like that, we actually should receive an error message, and that's actually a good sign. It would be a bad sign if we didn't receive an error message, because what it means is that our environment does not recognize that replication is not enabled. However, it does recognize that, so that's actually a good thing in this case. So just kind of a brief, really fast note about replication for those of you who may be completely new to this. Replication is when you basically are taking data from one server, and what it sounds like, you're replicating it to another server. You're duplicating that data onto the other server. Just a kind of a mental thought about what that would look like as a case in point would be like if you were to select, from a SQL perspective, select star into the same table name. If I was going to select from a table name on server A into that same table on server B, and let's say hypothetically server B didn't have that table, the difference with replication is it usually will have those tables and you'll set it to replicate. As a case in point, good example of this is that in one of the environments I worked at, we had, I want to say, about 300 servers and one table we could populate, and we had numerous servers who had that same table, and we knew with replication that all of those other servers would be affected. We only had to update the one table or insert new values in that one table, and all the other servers would be affected. So if you're completely new to replication, that's kind of a brief, really brief overview of what's going on. Okay. Well, one of the concerns, of course, with replication is, do the other servers have those data? And so one of the things that, for instance, the environment that I worked in, one of their approaches was doing table counts, right? They would look at this table on server A and compare it to the same table on server B and make sure the counts are equal. That's an example of doing some verification. Well, in MongoDB, one of the ways in which we can do that, which we've covered, is getting the last error, but we can actually specify a little bit more details on getting the last error. So in the case of this, you can see that basically what I'm doing here is using the database, then running db run command get last error 1, and you'll see that this is, we've covered this before, it gets the last error. Now suppose that I was in an environment where there was replication from one server to another, I could specify w2 here, and what this is going to do is it's going to ensure basically that a replication operation has succeeded, right? It would actually get information on that. Now you'll see in this case, because there is no replication, that it has not been enabled, so W2 plus won't work, and then of course you can see that the error is no replication. So that's actually legit, and that's actually a good sign, because it would be more of a concern if it actually recognized replication when it's not set up. So that's something to note. The other thing to note is that when it comes to get last error, the command, unless you specify a timeout, may block forever. So one of the things, let's just go ahead and let's go back to that. Hold on. Let's go back to this example here. So when we have get last error, one of the things we can do here is we can say w timeout, and I can specify 1000. Okay, which would be what is that? 1,000? I think that's 1,000 milliseconds. So basically 1 second. You don't, I guess you might want to allow it to go in infinite time, but keep in mind that if you do, you're creating a situation for blocking. So just be aware that if you don't specify that, or if you were to specify w timeout equals 0, basically it'll never time out. Okay, so that may be what you want. Again, it's like very much in SQL Server, it all depends on your environment, but just keep that in the back of your mind. So if you're looking for replication, look at the W command, W2 if you have two, and then of course, if you want to make sure that it doesn't block, specify a time frame. Again, the 1,000 there, as that example, is in milliseconds, so if you want to just give it 10 seconds, do something like 10,000.